Alrighty then. This is my starter. This is the active starter. I took it out of the refrigerator last night so it could come to room temperature before feeding. My digital scale. I have it set to grams because that tends to be a little more accurate for me. Bottled water. You can use tap water if you have good water. And all-purpose flour. So my recipe for regular sourdough bread calls for 95 grams of starter. So I want to end up with this amount to go back into the refrigerator when I'm done. And if I need 95 grams for my recipe, then I'm going to put in 50 grams of water and 50 grams of flour to feed it. When it becomes active, I'll take out my 95 grams and I'll have approximately this amount to put back into the refrigerator when I'm done. That's the plan. So we'll stick this on the scale. We'll zero it out. And we'll add well, it came out to 53, which is fine. Now I'll put 53 grams of flour. I'll zero it out again. And add 53 grams of flour. It's 3 grams of flour. Take that, mix it up. When you feed your starter with about ready to go. You can see I don't know if you can see the consistency of it or not. Clean up the sides a little bit so we can see how it grows. And we'll set the rubber band to the level of the starter. Now, we'll loosely cover it and wait for the magic to happen. Ideally, when it starts activating, the level will grow to some extent. And when it gets up to near its peak is the best time to use it to make your dough, or to make your bread rather. But you want to make sure that this is active and growing when you use it in your bread. That's it. Okay, it's about 2.5, 3 hours later, and you can see how much the starter has grown. It's on the growth cycle now. Based on the amount that I put in, it might get a little bit bigger than this, but not too much. So we're ready to put our bread together. We have everything measured out so we can put our scale away for, oh no, we'll need that in a few minutes. And we'll need our timer. Into our 260 grams of plain water, we're going to add 1.5 tablespoons of sesame seeds. Like I say, that's optional. It's not an exact measurement. And also 1.5 tablespoons of honey. You could probably use maple syrup as well. Okay, we're going to mix that just a little bit to loosen up the honey. Honey was pretty thick. Okay, that's fine. And now we're going to add in our flour, and this is the 400 grams of flour. I substitute a little bit of wheat gluten in there. Not necessary. If you're using bread flour, actually it turns all-purpose flour into bread flour, is all the gluten does. But all-purpose flour works just fine. Keep going until it's pretty well mixed. It'll be a fairly dry dough ball at this point, but that's okay. Now we're going to let this sit for 30 minutes. Let the flour absorb the water. That's called an autolyse. You don't have to do that, but I like to. Okay. What we'll want to do is put it into a plastic bag, cover it in a plastic bag to keep it from drying out. That would be like a Walmart bag. If you don't have a Walmart bag, I'm sure a Dollar General bag would work just as well. And we'll let that sit for 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes, so we're going to unwrap the bowl. And it's at this point that we add our salt. Here we have 4 grams of sea salt and 4 grams of sour salt. This gives the sourdough a little bit of tang. That's to taste. Sprinkle that over the dough here. And give it a little mix. Get it mixed in there just a little bit. And now we add our starter. And we're going to want 95 grams of starter. So roll on the scale. Zero it out. Take our starter, which, as you can see, is a little oops, we're a little past peak here, but it'll be okay. It's starting to deflate a little bit. So 95 grams is what we want. You can see the consistency of this starter. Some you see will be thicker and some will be thinner. $90, $94, $95, $96. And this will go back in the refrigerator. If you bake every day, you can leave it out on the counter as long as it gets fed regularly. If you don't bake every day, you can keep it in the refrigerator and feed it when you need to. Okay, now we have our dough and our starter. Now we mix. And it takes a little bit to get the starter mixed in with the dough. So you just keep at it until it's smooth. Depending on what kind of counter you have. You might want to put your bowl on a towel or a hot pad or whatever. There's no time limit on this stage. You just keep mixing until it's well integrated. You can certainly do this by hand if you're inclined. I'm not. Okay, that's about what it should look like. Now, let it sit again. You always want to keep it covered when it's resting so it doesn't dry out. Minutes. 30 minutes. See you in 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes since we mixed up the dough with the starter. So now what we need to do is fold it. And wet our hand a little bit here. And just grab the edge of the dough, just one edge. Stretch it out a little bit and fold it over. Turn the bowl. Grab the edge, stretch it, and fold it over. Grab the edge, stretch, and fold it over. And one more time. You do that one time for each side. Stretch it slowly so you don't rip it. And fold it over. we're going to do that 6 times every 30 minutes. No, we're going to do that every 30 minutes. We're going to do it once, and we're going to do that 6 times. So in 3 hours we'll be done. I've made a little note here. It's now 1 o'clock, so our first pull was at 1 o'clock. We'll do it again at 1:32, 2:33, and 3:30. And then after we do it, I'll cross it off just so I can keep track of how many we've done. Back in the bag. And the timer is set for 30 minutes. Okay, ready for pull number 2 at 1:30. Wet our hands a bit. One. 2. More water. Just to prevent sticking to my hands here. There's 3. And there's 4. You'll notice the farther you get into the pulls, the texture of the dough will change. See you in 30 minutes. Alrighty then, it's now 3:30 and this will be our last pull. A little water. You can see the dough is getting nice and smooth now. 1. 2. 3. 4. And now, as the recipe says, we let it rest for 4 hours. So the actual hands-on time is not very much, but wrap it up so it doesn't dry out. And that's it. 4 hours resting. Okay, it's been 4 hours proofing after our folding. What we're going to do now, we'll call the pre-shaping. Throw a little flour down on the table. not too much. And we'll scrape out our dough. Now we're going to a heavier scraper. Put one on the top here. And then we're going to fold the dough in on itself to start stretching what will end up being the top of the dough. Right now you could consider the dough as being upside down. We'll bring it up and over, up and over, up and over, up and over. Get it loose on the board and then just pull it from the side as such. So you're stretching the bottom, what is now the bottom of the dough. A little more. Creating some tension on the top of the dough. We're going to pick it up and turn it right, what will be right side up. We can form it a little bit more. And now we're going to let it rest for about 15 minutes. We're going to cover it. Just let it sit for about 15 minutes. And then we'll come back and do the final shaping and get it into the banneton for the final proofing. Okay, this will be the final step of tonight. Final step of the day. First thing we want to do, we're going to make this in a round loaf. So first thing we need to do is get a good coating of flour in the banneton. Keep it from sticking in there too much. What we're going to do with the dough is to put a little bit more tension on the top. When we put it into the basket, we'll put it in upside down. So we want to think of your dough as a top and a bottom. And right now it's top up and bottom down. Every time we scrape it like that, we're pulling some tension on the top. We're kind of tucking it under, stretching the top. Into the basket upside down. Don't worry about what the bottom of it looks like. This will fill in overnight, and tomorrow when we put it into the oven, we'll put it in upside down or right side up, what will be right side up. So this will end up being the bottom of the loaf. Now what we're going to do is put it back into the plastic. And this will go into the refrigerator overnight for 12 hours or so. Okay, it's the next morning. It's been about 12 and a half hours or so, and what we're going to do now is take the bread out of the refrigerator, put it on the parchment paper here. This is just for ease of handling. Score the top and then get it into the preheated 500-degree oven. Straight out of the refrigerator. See, it's risen some. Couple little air bubbles. Now what we're going to do is, this being the bottom of the loaf now, we're going to invert it. The easiest way I've found to do that is like so. Approximately. It'll stick a little bit, and you want to work fairly quickly because it will spread a little bit once it comes out of the basket. Dust off some of the flour. Put some more. This is just for decoration more than anything else. Makes the design stand out a little bit. Score it. Any number of ways you can score it. Okay, now we want to get it into the oven. And we set the timer for 35 minutes, and we'll come back and take the cover off. This is always the fun part for me. It's been 35 minutes, and this is the unveiling. I always like to see how it's popped in the oven and what it's going to look like. So here we go. Uncover it, take a peek. Put it back in to finish the crust and turn down the temperature to 425. And we'll leave it in there for another 10-15 minutes, check the temperature, the internal temperature, and go from there. Uncovering it, we'll finish the crust, darken the crust, and here we go. Okay, there's our 10-minute warning. What we're going to do now is take the internal temperature. It's an indispensable tool, a digital instant read thermometer. Jam it right into the center of the loaf. They say instant, but it's not quite instant. 208. We're close. What we want is between 210 and 215, and that's fairly important. We'll give it another couple of minutes. We'll try her again. 210. Good enough for us. And we'll lift it right out of the pan here. And now we let it completely cool before we slice it. You gotta let it completely cool, otherwise it'll be gummy inside.